innocent children. I question the word innocent, but that's what the question says. If you look in the Old Testament, in the Book of Deuteronomy, this is before Moses is still in charge of the tribes of Israel. This is before they ever cross the river into the land of Canaan. God gives them all types of do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 10 through 20 reads, "When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women and children, livestock, everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves. You may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat all cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby. However, in the cities of the nation the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance, do not leave alive anything that breathes. Completely destroy them. The Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Havanites, Jebusites, as your Lord God has commanded you. Otherwise, they will teach you to follow all the detestable things that they do in worshiping their gods. You will sin against the Lord your God. You will lay siege to a city for a long time, fighting against it to capture it. Do not destroy its trees by putting an axe to them, because you can eat their fruit. Do not cut them down. Are the trees people that you should besiege them? However, you may cut down trees that you know are not fruit trees and use them to build siege works until the city at war with you falls." God said to tear them up if they don't want to offer you peace, if they want to fight. And here's a list of cities that we don't want any survivors. God knew that some of these cities would make peace, some would refuse it, and then there would be some that need to be totally destroyed. If any evidence of the people that God singled out had been left, there would have been the possibility that they would have either the Israelites would have learned from the people they left living the detestable ways that they were practicing their what they called religion. God said, wipe them out. He didn't want anything left that would remind the children of Israel about these evil people. I was talking to Tammy last night about this. A real good example of everyday living about what happens if you don't totally get rid of something. Anybody ever tried to get rid of ivy at the house? You can't get rid of it unless you dig up every little square inch of root and spray it and everything else. You can clean it as clean as you can get it. Give it a week. It'll be back. Of course, I've always heard the only way to get rid of it is move off and leave it. But that's a good example of nature that shows what happens if you leave something that you don't intend to be there. It doesn't go away. Guys?
Well, when I was looking at this, I think the biggest thing that we have a problem with is the killing of the supposedly innocent children, because our finite minds, we can't understand God's thinking. Isaiah 55, verse 8 and 9 says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are my ways your ways. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. God's moral standard was in play here with wiping these people out. He knew that if these people were left, that they would influence the Israelites. And more than likely, the Israelites would take on their ways instead of them changing them. So there was the only way, just like what Ed's talking about with the ivy, the only way that they could take this problem away was to completely annihilate these races of people. During the time that we're looking at, and I look at it and I thought so much of what was going on then is so prevalent today with sin being accepted by us. We've become conditioned to politicians just outright lying to us, to the sexual sins, all the ways of the world. We're getting desensitized to it. And I think during this period of time, that's what the Amorites and the Jebusites and some of these people, they were evil people. I didn't realize until I got studying this just how bad these people were. I mean, they even had prostitutes in their worship services. I mean, how bad could that be? So anyway, from what I could see, the biggest problem was God's moral compass and our moral compass are two different things, because our moral compass is influenced by sin. We can't get past the part of our sin to be able to, I don't want to say justify, because you can't justify the actions of these people. I can't even justify the actions of some of the things going on today. So I think that the biggest problem we have is that we can't understand how God thinks. We never will. And that being said, we ask the question, well, okay, I can see, killing the adults to wipe that out. What about the kids? But how do we know that God didn't save those children by wiping them out, by them not being exposed and indoctrinated into that culture and that way of life, brought up in that totally. I just the more I read and the more I looked at that, just the things that they did were just. I just couldn't even believe that a people could live the way that those people were living, and God knew it. He promised Abraham. He told him that Abraham went. He fell in a deep sleep, and he told him in a dream that for 400 years his people would be in captive. They would be captive, but that he would punish the country that kept them in captivity, and then they would return. After 4 generations, they would return back to that land. And they did that. But when they came back, God said, you got to clean it up now. You got to make it right. And so I think that his moral compass, he knew that there was no way that they could come back to that land and intermingle with these people without there being consequences of them turning against him. And I think he thought that was the only way. And when the children were taken out, I think he saved their souls. I think he saved them by wiping the entire race out.
I think all three of us are on the same page. Does anybody have any questions? And then, because Scott out here has the microphone if you have any questions. While you are thinking about, okay, go ahead, Pete.
Hold these people. They didn't do it. They're paying for it today. However, with what God told these people, we're told that God is unchanging. Does the world we live in today negate what God said? Are the teachings of Jesus negating what God told these people to do?
Elders.
Two questions is because there's a lot of room for interpretation with these scriptures, and I the more I read, the less I understood. So
Very good question, but I think when Jesus came and the work he did, our focus since that time has changed. I think the world before then was preparing the way for him, and definitely his message changed, yes. Because Jesus' message of grace and mercy and love and forgiveness, so yes, that's my thought. Scott, do you have a?
Struggle between Israel and all their neighboring countries around them. And you have to wonder, had they not taken care of all this right after Moses' time, would the Old Testament have been short? Because there would have been less conflict. I mean, you'll never know, but they didn't always wipe out cultures, and when they didn't, then it obviously influenced them in a negative way, and they dealt with it all the way up until Jesus' time.
My other thought about this question was the word innocent. And then thinking about today what we're going through and two different things especially that are going on around the world. One of them is the COVID that is happening, and people who are doing everything right end up getting sick from it and dying from it. And us standing back and saying why and how and why. And the other one is the whole issue of abortion. The innocent lives that are taken there, and us standing back and saying why and how. My answer to all that, and also with this Old Testament, is the exact same thing, is the exact verse that Mike read from Isaiah. We don't even need to start trying to understand his ways, because they are way above our ways. And the other verse that I had written down was 2 Peter 3:8. We must not forget one thing, dear friends. A day is like 1,000 years to the Lord, and 1,000 years is like a day. He, being this being that is all-powerful, has the ability to be throughout time. Time does not factor in to God at all. He is there back then. He is here now. He is in the future. So he sees the big picture, whereas we're just ants here on this earth for a short amount of time, and we don't see the big picture that he sees. He already knows how it's going to end. He already knows when. We don't. It's much more than we can even fathom.
But Jesus didn't come to change what God did. Jesus came to fulfill what God said. And a lot of the things that Jesus taught wasn't cleaning up what God had said. He's cleaning up the interpretation that man had put on it. Because man had made all kinds of rules, what you can do, what you can't do, don't get caught doing this, whatever. And Jesus is saying, guys, that's not what it's about. You know, it doesn't matter if you say 47 Hail Marys, you know, or you wear the right scripture over your forehead. It's how you live. And you've got to live more godlike and do your best to represent our Savior in the world than worrying about a lot of things we worry about. But, I mean, the world's a sinful place, and the influence is there. God knew it would be there if they left anything in these cities. You leave one child who's seen something 30 years from now, he might decide to start, hey, well, we used to do this where I grew up, you know. And God didn't want that to happen. Anybody else have any questions? Exactly right. Mr. Swain always had a saying that, right's right, wrong's wrong, half right's wrong. And that makes a lot of sense. God doesn't change. He hasn't changed and won't change. And he's a loving God, yes, but he's also, if I said that's what it is, that's the way it is. And a lot of times, a lot of people have a hard time dealing with that because they want to make up their own ways to do things. Anybody else comment or question?
We keep hearing this comment around about innocent children. Is that God's word?
I don't think so. That was just a question.
we're having to fight with now. I mean, that's the way I think they are. Do you think so?
Well, when Jacob or God has always said that these people would always be fighting, always, and that's because of how they descended. You had conflict when they were first born, and God blessed one strain, one line of people. That's my people. And I don't know if the others were jealous or whatever, but they've always fought. I don't care how many peace talks or whatever you do over there. They're going to fight because God said in his word they would always have conflict. So you might as well stand back and watch them because there's not a lot we can do to stop them fighting with each other. And some of that falls over into the world like David's talking about 9/11. Some people are so selfish to the point they want to be seen and heard, and they pull something like that, which is an unbelievable act. And innocent people, thousands, passed away that day because of it. Anyone else? All right, next question is going to be fun. Got the wrong people up here. I need Wes up here to answer this one. The next question that we've been given: how do we deal with the head coverings for women and long hair and men statements that are in 1 Corinthians chapter 11? 1 Corinthians chapter 11 reads, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. I will praise you for remembering me in everything and for holding in the traditions just as I pass them on to you." Of course, this is Paul talking to Corinthians. "But I want you to realize that the head of every man is Christ, the head of every woman is man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man who prays or prophesies with his head covered dishonors his head, but every woman who prays or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonors her head. It is the same as having her head shaved. For if a woman does not cover her head, she might as well have have her hair cut off. But if it is a disgrace for a woman to have her hair cut or shaved off her head, then she should cover her head. A man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But woman is the glory of man. For man did not come from woman, but woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man. It is for this reason that a woman ought to have authority over her own head because of the angels. Nevertheless, in the Lord, woman is not independent of man, nor is man independent of woman. For woman came from man, so also man is born of a woman. But everything comes from God. Judge for yourselves. Is it proper for a woman to pray to God with her head uncovered? Does not the very nature of things teach you that if a man has long hair, it's a disgrace to you or to him? But that if a woman has long hair, it is her glory. Her long hair is given to her as a covering. If anyone wants to be contentious about this, we have no other practice, nor do the churches of God. Anybody want to start with that? Mike, you want to say something? Okay.
You know, I think it's both these issues that we're talking about. Paul addressed in the Corinthian letter. He addressed morality, and he had addressed the men and women roles. I think it's funny with everything that I said earlier about the way things are going today. Morality was an issue then, it is now, and it will always be an issue until the end of time. But from everything I looked at, it looked to me like, again, this is the gospel according to Mike, but I didn't see anything that said it was wrong for a man to have long hair or a woman to have short hair per se. But it seemed to me that the biggest thing was the distinction between men and women. That men didn't need to have long hair that made them seem feminine, and women didn't need to have short hair that made them seem masculine. That it seemed like Paul was saying that there is differences in the two, and that's the way God designed it from the beginning. It doesn't make any difference if you feel like you're a woman and you're a man, you're still a man, or vice versa. I saw one of the commentaries I was looking at had this quote in it, and I thought it was really good. It says, "A God-designed healthy male soul revolts against clothing himself in symbols of femininity, just as a God-designed healthy female soul revolts against presenting herself as a man." God designed this male and female, and I don't care what the world says, that's the way it is. I think the long hair versus short hair, I think it seemed to me like from everything I saw that it was regionally what was acceptable at one place might not be acceptable in another place. But I can't say that if a man has long hair that he's wrong. Me. I don't know if I missed the point, but I didn't see anything that said it's wrong for a man to have long hair, it's wrong for a woman to have short hair. But I did see where he says that men should be men and women should be women. Gospel according to Mike.
I got a couple of things about this. It seems to go along with Galatians chapter 5, where it was talking about Ephesians chapter 5, verses 21 through 33, where it's talking about Christ is the head of the church and husbands are the head of their wives, and the order of it all is God first, Jesus next, then man, and then woman, then we're all in charge of the children. And I think I feel like this whole first part of chapter 11 is talking about the appropriate authority, putting who needs to be in charge. But I want to throw a couple of monkey wrenches in this for my elder friends here. Let's go to verse 5. Verse 5, but a woman dishonors her head if she prays and prophesies without covering her head. What is this woman doing in this church at Corinth is my question to y'all. Where is she doing this?
Where is she doing it?
Is she whispering to her husband these prophecies and these prayers? If we had a prophecy, would we not want it said to the whole congregation? There you go.
I don't have a clue. I'm going back to the long hair. He got excited. Let me think about that one. One thing we got to remember in Corinth, there was a lot of sinful people that were, you had prostitutes and men that worked with prostitutes. Men that were with prostitutes had long hair. Prostitutes had short hair. And you have to remember, in biblical times, you couldn't tell the difference in a man or a woman by their dress because they dressed just about the same way. About the only way you could tell a difference was the facial hair. And if you'll remember in, forgot where it was, in the Old Testament, the men of David, when they were captured and they were shaved, they were embarrassed because the people that had conquered them had taken away their manhood, is the way they looked at it. We said earlier, God never changes, right? Why did God in the book of Numbers give instructions to someone who was going to be a Nazirite? One of the first things he told them, do not let a razor come to your head. Don't drink wine, all of this. But the big thing, speak to the Israelites, say to them, if a man wants to make a special vow, a vow of dedication to the Lord as a Nazirite, they must abstain from wine and other fermented drink, must not drink vinegar, must not drink grape juice or eat grapes or raisins. As long as they remain a Nazirite, they must not eat anything that comes from a grapevine, even the seeds. During the entire period of Nazirite, no razor will be used on his head. So you know he had long hair. God doesn't change. I think the biggest thing that Paul was trying to teach people is don't let people judge you by your look and think you're something else. Like I said, men and women just about had the same outfit as far as clothing. Men's might have been a little shorter or something like that, but still they were about the same. Tradition says, well, before I go there, there's a lot of churches that take that scripture and outlaw women wearing pants. Where does it say pants are men only? It doesn't. That's a cultural thing. So, I mean, even going back in Chinese history, supposedly women wore pants before men did. But yet all at once, nowadays, it's wrong for a woman to wear pants, and I disagree with that. A lot of it, Paul did not want the men and women looking the same and looking like the sinning part of Corinth that Ed's speaking.
I was looking back. Of course, Corinth was a seaport city, and as Ed mentioned, and Jeremy too, that it was there again. These places were the corruption, the moral degradation was just unbelievable about I knew it was bad, but I never had looked at it to see just how bad it was. They practiced child sacrifice, and part of that was because of a lot of the incestual relationships that they had, were bringing forth children that were handicapped. Anything where the strain of the genes was, and they would take these children and sacrifice them in order to get rid of them. Just like what we do today with abortion. So, have things really changed that much? But I still think, I think Ed said that it was talking about the men and the women in the temples that were practicing as prostitutes. The men had long hair to make them more feminine. The women had short hair to make them more masculine, because their sinful appetites had gone to the point where that anything goes. Kind of like today. So, kind of makes me wonder, is history repeating itself? Are we getting to the point where they were? I'm asking you. What do you think? Pete?
Pete's turn.
I got a question for you, Mike. You said they were sacrificing these children because of incestual relationship? Okay. But that was stated as one of the reasons. Starting with Adam and Eve, who did they marry? The offspring.
I thought about that too.
I just have one serious question. The question about head covering for women. Go back to the very first question. Would this have been a problem if the Israelites had done what they were told to do?
That's something we'll never know really the answer to. But Israelites were up and down. You know, they're up here and they're doing everything God said. And now it goes to boom. They're doing nothing God said. Then they get conquered and taken out. They're back up here doing everything God said. Not as often as they should have, that's for sure. They were forever changing it and doing, I mean, they were doing fine. Moses went up on the mountain to get the tablets, and he comes down, and they've decided they need to have a golden calf. They were doing okay till then. And, but it's almost like blind sheep. You know, somebody says something and then they all follow over here. They seem like they're always looking for a way to get out of what God's wanting them to do. Right. Hates it.
Okay. And we've always repeated history throughout since the beginning of time, because man hasn't changed or woman hasn't changed. Our greed and our lusts are always the same. We may have little different gadgets, but the base is the same. So That's why Paul says, always says, review, check to see if you're in the faith, because the standard will tell you whether or not you are in the faith. And many nations, I mean, when I was in Colorado, I read a lot of Old Testament because I was in a camp and was bored and didn't read all the other magazines that my brother gave me, but it shows that even God extended his invitation back then to the nations, but they didn't believe in God. They went always back to the idols, as well as the Egyptians did, or the Israelites went always back to the idols because it was easy, because it was their own religion.
Several times in this text, it uses the words interchangeably. If you switch the translations, customs, traditions, and teachings. Customs, traditions, teachings. One of the things that came to my mind is 1 Corinthians 14:33 in the King James Version is the best way to read that, where he says, God is not a God of confusion. So I think at these moments, we really need to focus on the red letters in the Gospels. That's my thought of all this. When we start wondering about customs, traditions, and teachings of the time. Terry, do you have a question?
We don't have a clue. I don't think we have a clue if angels have long hair. Did Jesus have long hair? I would think he would be more what was going on culturally. He probably had facial hair, but I would not be surprised if his hair was above his shoulders. I don't think it'd be like you see in all the artist renditions, the flowing hair. Of course, they don't ever show him. He was Jewish. He would have been dark complected. That's just the way it is. A lot of people don't like that idea, but that's the truth. We have people walking in. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Yes. So what are they saying? Don't look like each other. There is a separation between the sexes. Yeah. Before we dismiss, let's have a prayer.